All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Facebook Live for day 2 of This Moment in History, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. My name is Tommy Valentine. I am the Executive Director of Historic Athens. For over 52 years, our organization has been working to celebrate and conserve community heritage here in Athens, Georgia. In this moment, in this really unique moment in history, in this difficult moment in history, we've been trying to examine what our role is, like all other organizations here in Athens. And ultimately, we felt required to help explore and document this unique moment in history and to make sure that years from now, folks are able to look back and realize what it really felt like here. So, what we've decided to do is conduct 55 interviews with different community leaders around Athens, Georgia. And then at the conclusion of these interviews, every piece of audio and video is going to be compiled and sent to local libraries, local archives, so that when people are looking back, the same way we've been looking back recently at the impact of the 1918 flu in Athens, Georgia, that there are resources available. Now, yesterday you heard our interview with Broderick Flanagan, an incredible community leader. That was the first of our 55 interviews. Today, we're interviewing someone very special, Deborah Gonzalez, who's a community leader. She's served our community in multiple different ways. You may know her in so many capacities, but among those things includes her time as a state rep for this area. I think that it would be responsible to say that as a trigger warning for those of you who are currently feeling overwhelmed by this situation, today's episode is going to delve into grief, personal grief. Deborah and I corresponded this morning after originally scheduling the session and grappled with how to responsibly proceed, given that she is experiencing grief related to this situation that's very fresh and very timely. Fortunately for our viewers and for the people that refer back to this chronicle, the good news is that Deborah decided to be brave and that she decided to share her story with us today. So just before we begin our section with Deborah, I do want to emphasize that if through this conversation you want to find out more about Historic Athens, you can follow us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Historic Athens. We'll be doing these interviews every weekday until June 26th. You can also visit historicathens.com. We are a 501c3 nonprofit who are supported by members like Deborah and other people in our community. You can become a member for as little as $5 a month at historicathens.com. Today's programming was brought to you by our weekly sponsor. Each one of these 11 weeks, we're being sponsored by a different sponsor. This week, it's Gary and Joan Birch. And so we really appreciate their support. With that said, that feels like enough prelude. Let's get into the real interview here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring our guest on air with us here. One moment. All right. She'll be with us here in 2, 1. All right. Hello, Deborah. Welcome to our program. I hope that you're doing as well as possible today.
It's a tough day. It's a really tough day, but thank you for having me, and thank you for being a brave partner in this conversation that we're going to have. I must have been, like so many others of you, on at least 70 Zoom calls, right, since all this began, and online calls, small business, community updates, hospitals, mayor and commission, trainings and things like that. And I was thinking this morning that not once in all of those meetings, not once have we talked about death and grief. And if we're going to document what's happening in our community with this virus, we need to document this part too. Because I don't think we're giving voice to the very real aspect, right? That, we get stats every single day of how many people have gotten coronavirus, how many people have died, and the numbers are so abstract. We hear almost 2 million cases globally, almost 600,000 in Georgia. In the US, 13,000 in Georgia, 88 in Athens. And then we look at the deaths, 122,000 deaths globally, 24,000 deaths in the US, 464 deaths in Georgia, and 88 deaths in Athens. But behind each of those numbers is a person, is a family. And I think that when we see those numbers in abstract, we forget that. We forget that there are people and families who are suffering. And another thing is that we forget that a lot of times, a lot of that pain and struggle was there before the virus, right? There are lots of people in our community. We talk about how high our poverty level is and people not making it. And then we have something like the virus and people losing their jobs and not knowing, where am I going to get another meal for my kids? Or, on Facebook, I had a friend who said, I just dropped somebody I love off at the hospital. I don't know if I'm going to see them alive again. And thankfully, that person was able to go and pick up that loved one. But it's such a reality right now. Before I came on, I was at a Zoom vigil for my uncle who died yesterday. And in one way, there were family that I haven't seen in years, right? I haven't seen them. But at the same time, I was thinking, how different this would have been a month ago. Because last night, instead of putting out on Facebook that my uncle died, I would have been booking my flight. Today, I would have been, probably in New York already, probably picking up family, getting to somebody's living room, working out who's going to sleep on what sofa, who gets the air mattress, who's going to cook breakfast, who's going to, and being together. And I know, one of the things I want to make really sure that people understand is during this time, I don't like when we use social distancing. I don't like that term. Because we are physically distancing, but we must stay socially connected. Because these traditions, these rituals that we have when someone passes from our family, and this call from the heart for family members to come together. And it's not always about what you say. It's about just being there. It's about presence. It's about holding somebody's hand. It's about telling my aunt, I see you. I love you. It's about being able to comfort those that you're not with. And I am under no illusion, right? I am one of hundreds of thousands who have lost somebody during this time. I am just one story. But it is important every time we have one of these stories that we share it. Because we need people to understand that behind every number is a person. People were putting on Facebook, may his memory be a blessing. I am not a very religious person. But I find solace today in those words, in the beautiful Bible verses that people have shared and in their thoughts. And makes me think about the role of social in our lives, so much has changed, so much. And it was almost ironic that last week I started sending out these postcards to people, just a little touch to say, hey, I'm here. Are you okay? Reach out. And last night I went to bed after putting out that notice on Facebook about my uncle dying. And this morning I wake up to over 700 messages, right? Of people who say, hey, Deb, we're there. And it makes you realize that we don't grieve alone. We grieve together in family units, as communities. And that grief makes the reality real. Thank you for letting me say that.
Of course. One of the things that I'm sensitive to in undertaking this project is that there are going to be interviews, and this is already shaping up to be one of them, where my capability as an interviewer is going to struggle to keep up with the importance of the moment. But while I don't think this is something that is probably suits professional interview etiquette, I do want to say that, like so many other people in Athens, we see you and we care about you, and we know that this is a difficult moment. You know, I was reminded near the beginning, as you were speaking, there's this old quote. Unfortunately, I believe it's Stalin, but you know, he says that one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. And there is something about the comfort of the abstract, as you've explained it, that when you're seeing these death tolls rise until it hits you, it just seems like this rising statistic. What you know, when people are looking back at this interview 50 years from now, can you describe really from early January when these news? I know that you're very tapped in, so you may have even had this on your horizon back in December. But can you walk us through that trajectory of it going from abstract to real, and kind of how that process unfolded for you?
Yeah, and it's kind of hard sometimes to think back even a month.
Mhm.
Let's not say three
Mm.
months, but when all this started, um, with the news about the coronavirus, and my husband and I were thinking of SARS and the N1H1 and those, and Ebola and all of those things. And we said, we got this. It'll be under control. We've gone through this before. The US knows what to do. And then the US wasn't doing anything, right? And what we started seeing were people at the very local level starting to say, hey, we need to do something to protect people. We need, and, I'm old school. I remember, the idea that your federal government, that's your leadership, that's who you're going to listen to. And so if they weren't
Right.
saying, if CDC wasn't coming out, if WHO wasn't coming out saying that this is really a problem that we need to advance it, I was like, why are people getting really excited, and then started getting the briefings with the hospitals and the experts, and you say, this is different. This is a different scenario. And there's also all this thing, these conspiracy theories that come out, right? Because we're on social, we're reading all this
Right.
stuff, and you're saying, why do people believe these things? It's vaccine that's causing this. Don't vaccinate your kids because they're going to get coronavirus. This is in prep, or it's all those things that you hear about. And then people were like, you got to stay home, and the schools close, and the parks close, and things just keep closing, and you get this anxiousness and this anxiety, right? About, is this inevitable? You start hearing about things like herd immunity, the idea of, let's get as many people infected so that we can get it out of the system. And I was thinking about that concept of herd immunity because it says we're going to infect as many people as we can, and whoever dies, dies, and that's fine. And, that quote that you said from Stalin, every death is a tragedy. Every life is worth having to be alive. And it made me think about my values, like why I don't believe in the death penalty, right? Because everybody has the potential inside them to change. And we shouldn't take that away. We are not God. We are not God. We do not have that power. But we are seeing that certain decisions that have gotten made are costing lives, and this is not political rhetoric, right? When we talk about healthcare and people are dying and we talk about this, but people are dying. I see it more and more on Twitter, especially. I don't see it as much on Facebook, but on Twitter, which I prefer Twitter. But I see a lot. My brother died, my mother died, my sister, I hear them talk about their brothers and their sisters and their family members on the front lines in the hospital every day, putting their lives on the line. Or I see on PBS NewsHour, the ZMT technician, $27,000 a year, no insurance, no health insurance. He works in EMT. He has faced this every single day, every hour of every day, and he doesn't have protection and he doesn't have insurance. And then you hear political debates about, we have to open up the economy, we have to do this, we have to protect the people, and we have to come together. And if somebody's hungry, we have to give them food. And I know that Athens is an amazing town, right? Because you hear, we have things like the virtual tip jar, and we are doing virtual concerts, and we are trying to raise money. Well, you know what? GoFundMe is not a damn insurance.
Right.
That is not the way we take care of our people. We need, and so I know we talk about this stimulus check. I am very fortunate. My husband and I, we're fortunate. We're not going to get one, right? Because we just make too much. And there are others, but that doesn't stop us from trying to help people, because we know that there are so many less fortunate than us. When I can say, what do I want to eat? I can get anything I want. I can have it ordered. I don't have to worry about that, right? I don't have to worry about my rent or my mortgage. I don't have to worry about my phone. My son-in-law lost his job because of this. My kids are going to be okay. My grandkids are going to be okay. I can take care of them. But how many people every day wake up saying, I don't know what I'm going to do? I am not an elected official anymore, but I still get the emails and the Facebook posts and the texts saying, Deborah, who do I call? Deborah, what do I do? And I keep trying to connect those dots, right? Trying to give them something, because you know what we need more than anything, Tommy? We need hope. We need to remember that we will get through this. And because of that, we also have to intentionally decide, who are we going to be when this is over? I believe that we are going to be facing a new normal when the worst of this is over, right? But it's not going to go back to what it was before. And so what I want to do is I want to make it better, right? I want to make sure we have a better place when we get there. I am so grateful to our mayor and commissioner, Kelly Gertz, who's out there always giving us information. Grateful to the different people like you, Historic Athens, saying we have to have these conversations. We have to have these conversations. And today, when I text you in the beginning, I said, I don't know, I'm going to be so emotional. How do I get through this conversation? People don't want to see you emotional. But at the same time, this conversation has not happened yet in our community. We have not been able to see the raw grief and to talk about the pain that this virus has caused in terms of a death. Because you know what? In healthcare, we can get people healthcare, right? We have these incredible clinics like the Shifa Clinic and others who are offering healthcare for free. But when it's death, it's final. You can't fix death. It's over. And you have to think of the people who are surviving. And we are grieving so much, not just a death. Look, we have kids who are grieving that they can't see their friends from school. We have kids who are grieving that they've lost their chance for their graduation. How do they celebrate that? We have people who are grieving because they're stuck at home with an abusive spouse and can't get out. We have so much that we are grieving for. I read an article the other day in the New York Times about how people are going to be suffering from PTSD from this. This is not normal. Being in your home day after day, being told don't go out because it's dangerous and don't infect other people. This is not normal. This is not how people have lived. And then I think, Deb, that's not true. There are people who have lived that every day, afraid to go out because of the color of their skin, afraid that they might get stopped, afraid that they might die, that they might not come home. I can remember such a good friend telling me she has twin boys, African American single moms, saying, I am afraid every day my boys go out the door, whether they will come home. And you think about that, people have lived just like we are living now. They've been living that for decades and generations. And we have not seen it. We have not given them voice. We have not given them credence. And we need to do that now. If this is how we open our eyes, we need to understand.
So, Deborah, sorry to break in. What you just said, that's something that came up during Broderick's interview yesterday, that in some ways the kind of mass uncertainty and danger that the plurality of the community is feeling now is something that for several of our community members that you just referenced, that fear has already been there every day. That's something that it's already baked in. And I want to make sure we dedicate part of today's program to your notion of hope. And I want to get back to that. Very briefly, I do want to mention, if you're tuned in and you want to participate, one of the nice things about this platform, and you'll get used to this over the following 50 odd interviews, is you can comment and we'll be able to bring it up on screen where our guests can see what is being said and chime in. So I just want to bring a few of those comments up. First, Dan Delamater said, thank you for sharing today. Your story and perspective is very important. Thanks, Dan, for tuning in and for sharing those words of encouragement for Deborah. Jeff Clark said, great show. Thank you, Jeff, for tuning in. And thank you for that encouragement. And then Lindsay Brannon shared love and peace to you, Deborah. And so I know that that's a sentiment that a lot of our viewers right now are feeling as well. So, Deborah, I am fine. Everything you're saying is so important for us to hear and record. And so I want to make sure that my fingers are on this thing as little as possible. With that said, you've brought up several strands that I think we need to investigate. Today, I was out running before this interview, and I saw a woman. It appeared, although I'm not assuming that she was experiencing homelessness, but I watched her drop some things and them scatter across the street. And she picked them up before I would have had the chance to help her anyway. But I just found myself thinking, when this is all over, will we be in a society where people rush to help strangers, or whether there will be this embedded fear of touch and closeness and sickness, and that pessimism, that sadness stayed with me until what you just said about this idea that we have this opportunity for hope coming out of this, that we can decide to hit the reset and come back and do something different. Obviously, we're going to get to some other questions. Anyone who's out there watching can submit questions in the comments section, but let's start there. When you think of hope after shelter in place is over, what does hope look like to you?
Something as simple as a smile. I was at the grocery store, ran out of milk, so I had to go get milk today. And even though I had on a mask, I kept finding myself smiling at the people I passed, and hoping, well, maybe they'll see the smile through my eyes. But hope is that we see each other. Hope is that we understand we're all going through this together, right? And that when one of us hurts, it hurts the entire community, and that we have to be more intentional. hope is not something that is just given. It has to be intentional. It has to be something that we decide to hold on to. Never thought I would be in politics, right? But here I am. And I can remember people saying, why bother? It's so gerrymandered. Why bother fighting? Why put yourself out there? You're just, asking for bruising. People are mean. They're going to say mean things. Why? I do it because I hope. I do it because if we don't hope that something will change, why should we do anything at all? And that shouldn't be the lesson we teach our kids. The lesson should be that though it may take time, we can do it. And I have a book in my bookshelf, and it's called The Impossible Will Take a Little Time. And I love that. I love that title because what it says is that nothing's impossible, first of all. And two, that we allow ourselves to be patient with ourselves, that we give ourselves the grace that we can do piece by piece, step by step. Every act that we do is one step forward, right? But to do nothing, to stay still, then we're always going to be behind. And so what we need to just say to ourselves is, I can do this little bit right now. And that's phenomenal. And I learned a lesson about a week ago. I was in a Zoom call and I made a comment about somebody who was lying in their bed, and it was a business call. And that professional jerk hat of a lawyer in me was like, this is business. Sit up on your bed. What are you doing? And then somebody caught me and somebody said, maybe getting up and turning on the computer was the best that person could do.
Right.
And I was like, wow, what bias do I have, right? You're in business meeting, you should be this way. And yet in Athens, where so much of our businesses are small businesses, solo entrepreneurs, and sometimes, getting out of bed is the best we can do.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that about others. We have to give grace to others the way that we want people to give us grace. And so I continue to learn, and that's where hope is, that we can learn, that we can change.
So let's stay with hope for a second here. We just had two really great questions come in. I'm going to go to the first one, and I'll read the rest of it, Deborah. So this is from Gary Birch. Gary, thank you and Joan for supporting us this week with your sponsorship. So Gary's full question reads, Deborah, thank you for sharing your experience and helping us better understand the present. You also give us hope for the future. Can you share some of what you hope to see happen in our community in the years ahead? I think you were touching on some of that, but are there specifics? Are there tangibles? Are there things that you hope to see change in the years ahead after this moment?
I hope that true inclusivity becomes the norm. And what I mean by that is there are some great things happening in the community, but still at this time, we don't have everybody at the table. And a lot of marginalized people, a lot of minorities are feeling the struggle very acutely. And, I love what the Athens Area Chamber has done with these community updates. But you know what? If people don't have a computer, if people don't know about it because they're not a member of the chamber, or they don't, get their emails or stuff like that, then they're not part of that conversation. And so it becomes a very skewed conversation. I don't want minorities to be the afterthought.
Right.
Oh, we have a great idea to fix the community. Oh yeah, we didn't talk to those people. Let's talk to them now after it's said, after it's done. And then we find out that's not really what they needed. you went through all of this, but that's not it. And it reminds me of the book 3 Cups of Tea, where this guy goes, to this rural village overseas and thinks, oh, he's going to bring the school. And so he raises all this money and brings all the stuff to build the school. And at the end, the people were like, that's not what we needed. We didn't need the school. We needed food. You could have brought the stuff to make a farm, right? And that's what I hope, is that we start not putting people as an afterthought, but bringing them to the table at the very, designing the system, designing the processes with all those people in mind. I think that's something that we can do as a community in the years ahead, right? I think keeping these connections going is something that we have to keep doing in our community. Understanding, we have so many people out there making masks or giving out food, or, let's not stop that. Let's not go back and say, okay, it's all good now. People are working. That's fine. Let's help people get $15 an hour or more, right? So that when these things happen, they're not at that deficit. Let's start with that. Let's do those little things that we're learning now. There was something, I was watching PBS NewsHour or some video that Bob, I really, sorry that I can't remember which one it was, but somebody saying, oh my God, if we start helping people, they're going to expect it. They're going to want it, right? People are smart enough, and people don't want handouts. They want ways to make it better so that they can provide themselves. People have pride. They want to work. They want to do what needs to be done to provide for their families, and they want access to the same opportunities as everybody else. And, I can remember Celeste Negevi in the very, very beginning when I first met her. She told me something about kids. She says, if you tell a kid they're stupid, that's what they're going to be. But if you tell a kid you are the most amazing person, we need you, you are so important, they'll live up to that. And so maybe in the future, what our community can do is really watch our words, what we say to each other, what we say to the kids, and walk the talk. Not just say things, but really be there for them.
So, once again, I think that being trapped in this moment, we're describing a future that, if this project is successful, by the time people review these materials, they'll know whether that future has come true or not. And so I know that, when we're talking about these destinations we hope we end up, there's also the conversation about the process too. And so I want to share this question from Dion Wareham. Once again, if you've just tuned in to this conversation with Deborah, you can comment in the comment section below, and we can include your questions in our dialogue. We're about halfway through our discussion with Deborah today, but we'd love to get to your question. So this is Dion Wareham. Dion is a wonderful community member, among other things. She's been a Spencer Fry Fellow. She's at SPIA, and we have the privilege of working with her. She's one of our interns. Dion submitted the question. I'm not sure if this question has already been asked, but how do you think the community can begin to heal from the anxiety surrounding COVID-19? So when we're thinking about that hopeful destination, Deborah, that you've sketched out for us, there's got to be some kind of process for us to get there. How do you think we can begin that healing process to get there?
I think the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that it's there, that this is not normal, that people are scared, they have fear, there's anxiety. If I ask the people who are listening, how many of you can't sleep at night or wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning or are taking sleeping pills, or, first thing is we have to acknowledge this is not normal. And because it's not, because there's so much uncertainty, it's okay to feel some anxiety. It's okay. You're okay. It's not, if you weren't, maybe we should worry, as they say, but this is not something that people usually go through. And then the second thing is we have to talk. We have to keep that social connection. Suicides are on the rise. You know, people who feel that they're completely alone and can't reach out. And so we have to keep that connection going and talk to people and talk it out. Keeping it inside is not good, right? It just will build up. It's not going to go away if you keep it inside. It's just going to build up, and it's going to make you sick, and it's going to make you more vulnerable to the virus or any other number of diseases, because that's the other thing, right? The virus is one thing, but there's still cancer, and there's still diabetes, and there's still high blood pressure, and there's still colds and the regular flu, and people are still getting sick, all this stuff is still happening. This is just on top of all of that. And so I think that's the first thing. Let's acknowledge that it exists. Let's talk to each other about it. And then the third is, let's plan for a future, because there will be one. You know, my mom likes to say, you know, this too will pass, right? This is hard now. We're in the middle of it right now, and things may get worse, you know, but it will pass, and we have to think of the future. I posted a video of my uncle and my family dancing. This was a party, the last family gathering before he went to the nursing home. It was sort of between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And in that video, which is from 2012, which I haven't seen in a while, there is him for a moment and his wife, but then there's his granddaughter who had just been born, who is now 8 years old. Children are hope. And what's their future going to be? Let's plan a future for them better than what we're living right now. And sometimes when you focus on somebody else, right? When you focus on fulfilling somebody else's need and you get out of yourself, it makes it easier to deal with what's going on, because you feel you have this purpose. You feel you have a way that, okay, I'm not useless, just staying here at home. I'm actually helping somebody, and that person needed my help. And that, to me, is one of the best ways that you get over this anxiety, is by helping others.
So, Deborah, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned something that seems like it'll be historically important to understand what it was like. And so I'd like to ask a question, and if you don't want to delve too deep into it, that's fine. But you mentioned that immediately prior, I mean, minutes prior to this conversation, your uncle who you lost to this disease, you had a Zoom memorial for him. And that's something that I can't imagine even a few weeks ago anyone could have considered. Experiencing a memorial via video chat. Would you mind walking us through that process and how it affected the community around you, your family and everyone involved?
Yeah. So first of all, I have a very large family. There are 13 brothers and sisters on my mom's side and 9 on my dad's. And out of all those, only 3 have died. And it had been a long time since a relative had died. And my sister, who's in the UK right now, quickly organized a Zoom vigil. And so she, very organized, right? Put a program. We're going to start with a prayer and a reading and a song, and this person's going to talk and that person's going to talk. And so she sent it out. We're all on Zoom. And, you know, again, this is something we haven't seen each other for years, some of us, right? And there were people there that I know are my cousins that I've never met. And so my sister put us all on mute because we were all talking. You know, we were all like, oh my God, how are you? How are the kids? And you're all talking. My sister's like, you know, we've got to get on time because people have other meetings to do. And so she put us all on mute, and we were all like, why are we need that talking, right? We can't touch each other, so we wanted to talk. And so we would say a prayer, and at the end of a prayer, as many religious traditions have, you're supposed to say amen. So, and she would unmute us so that we can say amen. And quickly, as we said amen, it was like, and yes, and we try to put in those words, and then she'd mute us again. And of course, there were some technical difficulties. The song had a delay, and the PowerPoint that she put, some of the words were so small you couldn't read them, or somebody was on a phone, so they couldn't really read what was on the PowerPoint. And yet you got through it, and I would scroll through the faces and see my parents, and see my mom grieve, see my niece, see my uncle, who was so close to his brother and who had helped him, would go and travel to the nursing home and clean him and feed him, and see his daughter and his wife and the grandkids. And I can remember a few years ago creating the power of attorney for her dad. And just seeing my cousins and everybody, sniffling with the little tissue, right? Wiping their eyes. And then the chat was just filled with love you, sending virtual hugs, love you all. And doing some jokes, sharing some memories about my uncle and him, what I call the conjunto, or the band. There were 4 brothers, and every time they got together, they would put on music, and everybody would take an instrument, whether it was a pot and pan, or, a guayo, or whatever it was, and they'd play, and my aunts were all the backup singers, and they would dance in like unison, right? The 50s and the 60s, and Under the Boardwalk, and, it's Saturday night, and I ain't got no money, and all those songs. And so we're reliving that. And you're grateful, at least you can see each other. You're grateful for that human connection. And yet, you're always aware that if it wasn't for this virus that took my uncle, we would be together. He might still be alive. We would be planning a family gathering. And so on one hand, there you are with your family, and at the other hand, you are more conscious than ever of how far you are. My kids, one of my daughters is in North Carolina, the other daughter's in Miami. My parents are in Florida. My sister's in the UK. My brother's in New Jersey. And you realize how far you are. And it brings it home that nobody should die alone. Nobody should grieve alone. It brings home the concern for the people who are in nursing homes. Athens is a retirement community. And there was a story that broke about 10 people in a nursing home. And yet those numbers aren't reported in the totals by our state government, the people who get sick and die in these nursing homes. And I know that people say, well, it's because it hasn't been confirmed. But I will take the definition that somebody shared on Facebook, that you should count the people who died if they would have been alive if it was not for the virus, right? So they may have had an underlying condition, but if it wasn't for the virus, they would be alive with us right now. And that number is really big. And so that's it. I didn't get to the end of it, to tell you the truth. It was very hard for me to get to the end of that vigil. And then they were going to do the rosary and what we call a novena. And I just couldn't do anymore. So I was kind of grateful that I was going to come on to the show at that time. Because it's hard. It's hard to face that. And the other thing with the technology is, you know, when you have that video on, it's your face,
Right.
right? And people see the raw emotion, the ugly crying, the the stuff, and you just see that from each other, and you want to hug them. I never thought I was a hugging person. My kids will tell you, you know, when I raised them, I wasn't a very touchy-feely person. And now it's like, I just want to hug everybody.
Right.
And I can't. And I want to tell them, you're loved. You are loved.
Deborah, we've got about 15 more minutes together, and we're about to switch gears slightly, but I want to say that I know this is a topic that you're not alone in going through, and I know that a lot of our viewers are going to appreciate you being so candid. I'll just share this. Jeremy Field just dropped into the comments to say that thank you, Deborah, for being very authentic and sharing your experiences and thoughts during this strange and difficult time. So thank you, Jeremy, for that encouragement. I do want to briefly say, because it needs to be said very briefly, that we appreciate the sponsors that make Historic Athens possible. I have them up here on the screen. If you wish to become a sponsor with us and join this group of supporters in our community, you can visit historicathens.com to become a sponsor. You can also just become a donor member. We rely on those memberships to provide our funding. And so you can visit historicathens.com and become a member. We've tried to keep it very affordable. If there's some other way that you have in mind that you'd like to support us, you can reach out to me directly, tommy@historicathens.com, or you can just call me, text me, whatever you're comfortable with. My phone number is 706-296-3583. It's also on the website. But we do want to thank these sponsors. And then very briefly, I also want to just add this one note here, just so that everyone's up to speed. So over 11 weeks, we're going to be conducting 55 interviews. This series is called This Moment in History, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. You can visit our Facebook page to see the full list of sponsors. We're going to be thanking them one a week. We have 11 sponsors, 11 weeks. But we do appreciate everyone that made this possible. This week is being brought to you by Gary and Joan Birch, and we really appreciate their kind support so that we can document and explore this difficult and strange time in Athens history. So if you do wish to support us, you can do so at historicathens.com, and every dollar, every donation, every membership helps. So Deborah, resuming the program here with the time that we have together. So I want to go to some questions that we're trying to ask everyone so that we have those answers from all our community leaders across the board. So one is a bit lighthearted, which is, as you know, with shelter in place, while some restaurants are currently providing curbside, there's so many places that are closed. Is there something that you wish you could go out and do right now that you can't do? Is there I've been telling people I miss all our local restaurants. I'm spending as much money as I can afford in our local restaurants. My craving right now, though, is for a Waffle House All-Star Special. I just wish I could go get a Waffle House All-Star Special right now. Is there anything like that you find yourself craving that this moment has really hit home for you on?
I miss the library. I miss all the incredible programs that they had there in the community, and I miss the library. I miss going there. And I miss actually going to some of the restaurants. Yeah, you can still get food, and I bought gift certificates, and we order out once to twice a week to make sure that we're spreading it. But the whole, action of actually going to restaurants, sitting there, seeing people. I mean, my husband used to kid me that, we can't go any place and not at least 5 people come up to me and say, "Hi, Deborah," right?
Mm-hmm.
And just that stuff of seeing music live in person, not just through a video. I miss that.
Yeah.
Cheering on the people that going to all the art shows, the fairs that, we have such incredible artists here in Athens. And I miss that. I miss being physically close to people is what I miss the most. And, it was funny when you said the questions that we ask ourselves today. Over the weekend, my husband and I, we used to love walking in the botanical gardens, the trails. And since I got into politics, we just haven't had time. And now we have time. And yet we were both like, but shelter in place, do we really need to go out? It's like now you ask yourself 5, 6 times, do I really need to do that?
Right.
No, I got to stay home,
Right.
and I see people going out and walks, and I'm saying, but part of sheltering in place is sheltering in place,
Right.
is being at home and being in one place. And I know that's really hard for us, but I'm so concerned also about reinfections. We're starting to see that now in
Right.
China, in Korea. We're starting to see reinfections. So this idea, well, once you got it, then you're immune, is not true. It's not, faring out the way that people thought it was going to. People can get reinfected, and
Right.
people can reinfect others. And I think that's what I think of most of all. My husband's at a certain age. I have an underlying condition. So many of my friends, Bruce Menke, shout out to him. He had an 80th birthday
Yeah.
on Friday. And in my mind, I think, what if he got sick?
Mm.
What if they got sick because I came home or I came into contact with them and I brought it in? Maybe I'll be okay, but they won't. That's what I think about. That's the questions that come in my mind. And I say, okay, I've got to answer those questions, not about me, but what happens next
Right.
after that? I try to limit, I'm at the grocery store with the mask, with the gloves, with the, sanitizing wipe of the car when I come back. And yet I see people without masks.
Right.
I see people who look at us who do wear masks almost with contempt, like, what are you doing?
Right.
And part of me wants to say, well, I'm doing this also for you, because what if
Right.
I'm sick and we don't know? This won't let you sick. And it's just so much to be able to process right now.
So yeah, navigating it, just the burden mentally is a lot. I do want to say, Joma Construction just chimed in to say, great work, Deborah and Tommy. This program is another reinforcement that Athens is a good place to be in this moment in history. Thank you. Thank you, Joma. For those of you that don't know, Historic Athens, one of our initiatives is Hands on Athens, which does low income, it does direct home repairs for low to moderate income homeowners in historic homes and neighborhoods. That work wouldn't be possible without Joma, who helps provide a lot of those home repairs. And so we really appreciate Joma, and thanks for that encouragement. Deborah, historically, right after moments like this, which, because while the economy is not our only concern, when you have recessions related to issues like this, historically, what tends to happen, and I know you tuned into Broderick's conversation with me yesterday, so you may remember this question. People tend to become so eager to bring the economy back that they're suddenly willing to tear down pieces of history around them if it means new builds, new jobs, just newness, just some sense of agency in their community. And so here at Historic Athens, we expect, as shelter in place is removed and as we return to whatever normal becomes then, a lot of our historic resources to be endangered and in peril. And we're trying to prepare for that moment. What we're doing is we're asking each of our guests at this moment, what are the historic spaces in Athens that are most important to them? What are the places that they treasure, that they hope this community will continue to treasure? Is there anything that comes to mind, a building, a place, a site, a cemetery, anything that you find really critical to Athens?
I would say the Morton Theater
Mm.
is something that we have to hold on to. Um, you know, there's so much. And I can remember a year or so ago when Historic Athens did the tours of the homes, and you go to the homes and you hear the history of that home, and maybe that home wasn't in that place, maybe it's moved a while, right? A couple of places, but now it's in that place. And we talk about why is that place so important, why is that building so important. And I can remember, Tommy, you were on my show, Open Records, my first guest, and you talked about uh, a building that was, up to be demolished to put in parking lot. But the architect was an African American, right? And how important it was to hold on to those few instances where it really made a significant difference, that that person was a minority, or that that person was somebody who maybe the rest of society decided would never amount to anything. And what I will say is that when we get out of this, what's important is intentionality, that we just don't knee-jerk response to making everything open again, that we take the time to think it through and make the right decisions so that we respect and preserve our culture and our history, and at the same time provide opportunities for growth and the future. Because if we erase the past by destroying those buildings, all it does is takes away a building. It doesn't erase the past. The past is there. And it will be rediscovered, just like Linen Town, right? After all these years, it gets rediscovered and it comes out, and the pain is as real as it's ever going to be. But wouldn't it have been great for those residents of Linen Town to have had the respect that their history was written and documented and known, and that they can go to a place and say, yeah, this was my home. And we have to make sure that we don't get rid of that, right? That there are places here in Athens that hold so much for so many people. I think of Linda Davis and the Brooklyn Cemetery and all she does for that place. And, she says it's because her ancestors are there, but also the lessons from the past for each of us are there, of things that we don't want to happen again, of reasons why we should have hope and why we should be making a better future, are in that cemetery as well. And I think it's important that whatever we do with intention. We do consciously, and we think about it, and we really include everyone that needs to be at that table.
Well, Deborah, powerful words. We don't have any questions left for you, but as we were trying to do with each of our guests, it's very likely that someday, 50, 60 years from now, maybe further in the future, people are looking back at this interview. To those researchers or those viewers, what should people know about Athens today, or Athens in this moment? What would you like to close by sharing?
Athens in this moment is not perfect, and it is made of people who are not perfect. But in those imperfections, Athens did not hold back to help others in their community, to reach out to those who are in grief, to send out virtual hugs. And Athens was not afraid to say, I love you. I want people 50, 60 years from now to understand that even in the most difficult times, Athens was a place of hope and a leader in this state.
Deborah, thank you so much for that. And thank you for being one of those leaders. We look forward to seeing your work, and we look forward to working alongside you to make that hopeful vision you articulated earlier today come true. We wish you all the best, and we offer you our condolences, and we thank you for your bravery and candor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. To everyone who is tuned in today, we hope that you'll join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock for our next interview. Tomorrow we'll be talking to Dan Geller of KinderCore and exploring a little bit about how this looks from the small business perspective. Once again, if you wish to support us, you can do so at historicathens.com. You also can share this video to help Deborah's message and exploration of grief in the time of coronavirus reach a larger population. So we're so thankful for all of you. Thanks for everyone who participated with your questions. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much. And please take care.